I used to think Alaska was beautiful in a clean, untouched kind of way. The kind of place that only exists in postcards and nature documentaries. Endless white, silent forests, mountains that look like they were carved out of ice itself. After what happened to me in the winter of 2019, I don't see it that way anymore. Now, when I think about Alaska, I think about isolation. And I think about that cabin. The one that shouldn't have existed. I moved to Alaska in late October of that year for work. I was 27 and had just accepted a temporary contract as a survey technician for a small environmental research company based out of Fairbanks. The job involved long drives into remote areas, taking measurements, mapping land that most people would never step foot on. It sounded like adventure, like something worth telling stories about later. What I didn't understand back then was that Alaska doesn't feel like the rest of the world. The distances aren't just physical, they're psychological. When you're out there, you don't feel far from cities. You feel far from people, from help, from reality itself. By December, winter had fully set in. Not the kind of winter I was used to growing up in Oregon. This was different. The cold didn't just sit in the air, pressed against you. Every breath felt sharp, like it was cutting your lungs from the inside. The job sent me out with a company truck to collect readings from a series of remote points along an old access road that hadn't been used in years. It was supposed to be a simple overnight run. Drive out, set up equipment, sleep in the truck, and return the next day. The weather forecast said light snow. That's not what I got. About 4 hours into the drive, the snow started coming down heavy and fast. Thick flakes, blowing sideways, cutting visibility down to a few car lengths at best. The road was nothing more than two faint lines carved into white emptiness. Turning back wasn't really an option. The nearest town behind me was just as far as the nearest station ahead. So I kept going. By the time the sun disappeared, I was completely alone. No headlights, no radio signal, no cell service. Just the sound of tires crunching over packed snow and the low hum of the engine. The storm worsened as night settled in. Wind howled through the trees like something alive. Snow slammed against the truck hard enough that I could feel the vibration through the steering wheel. It felt like driving through static. That's when I realized I was lost. The GPS screen froze, then shut off entirely. The road I'd been following slowly vanished under drifting snow until I couldn't tell where it ended and the wilderness began. I pulled over. The silence was immediate and overwhelming. When the engine shut off, the storm became everything. Wind, snow, darkness, no sense of direction, no reference points. Just me sitting in a truck that suddenly felt very small. I tried restarting the engine. Nothing. The battery was dead. I sat there for a long time with my hands on the wheel, listening to my own breathing and the storm beating against the metal shell around me. Panic comes in waves in situations like that. It doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in slowly, convincing you to stay calm while it builds underneath. I knew staying in the truck was safer than wandering into a blizzard. But I also knew if the storm didn't ease, and if no one came by, which was very possible, I could freeze to death right there. That's when I saw the light. A warm, yellow glow, faint and flickering, far off to the right side of the road. At first, I thought it was a reflection. Or maybe my eyes playing tricks on me after staring into white for too long. But it didn't disappear. It stayed there, steady, pulsing softly through the snowfall. At a cabin out here. I stared at it for a long time, debating. Every instinct told me to stay put, but another part of me, louder and more desperate, kept whispering that warmth meant survival. So I grabbed my flashlight, wrapped myself tighter in my coat, and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit me instantly. Felt like my skin was being burned by ice. Each step through the snow was heavy and slow, my boots sinking deep into drifts that came up past my ankles. The light grew brighter as I approached. The cabin stood alone in a small clearing among the trees. Old wooden walls, snow piled thick on the roof, a single window glowing warmly from inside. Smoke rose from a crooked chimney. Someone was there. That alone felt wrong. This area wasn't on any map I'd seen. No recorded structures. No access roads. No utilities. Yet here it was. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again. Louder. Still nothing. The wind howled behind me, pushing snow against my back, urging me not to stand there thinking too long. So I did something I still can't fully justify. I opened the door. The warmth hit me like a wall. The sudden contrast made my knees weak. Inside, the cabin was small but well kept. A wooden table, a chair, a narrow bed pushed against one wall, a fireplace burning low, its embers glowing orange, and no one inside. But someone had been there recently. A mug sat on the table, steam still rising faintly from it. A coat hung on a hook by the door. Boots stood neatly near the entrance. It felt like I had walked into a moment that hadn't finished happening yet. I called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded wrong in the quiet, like it didn't belong there. No answered. I shut the door behind me, locking out the storm, and stood there trying to slow my breathing. I told myself the owner must be nearby, maybe tending to something outside, maybe checking traps or firewood. I sat down by the fire, holding my hands close, feeling life slowly return to my fingers. That's when I noticed the photos. They were pinned to the wall near the bed. Old photographs, black and white, faded with age. People stood in front of the same cabin, smiling stiffly at the camera. Men, women, a child. Their clothing looked outdated. Thick wool coats, fur-lined hoods. The style felt wrong for modern Alaska. Then I realized something worse. Every single photo was of different people, but the cabin behind them was exactly the same. Not just similar, identical, same warped roof, same crooked chimney, same window placement. Decades apart. I stepped closer, studying the faces, and that's when my stomach dropped, because I recognized one of them. It was me. Or someone who looked exactly like me, same face, same height, same posture, standing in front of the cabin, smiling faintly. The photo looked old, too old to be possible. My heart began pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I backed away slowly from the wall. That's when I heard footsteps outside, slow, crunching through snow. I turned toward the door just as the handle began to move. It opened slowly. A man stepped inside. He was tall, bundled in heavy winter clothing. His face was weathered and pale, eyes dark and hollow like they'd seen too much cold. He looked at me calmly, like he'd been expecting me. "You found it," he said. His voice was quiet, flat. I couldn't speak at first. "Found what?" I finally asked. He glanced around the cabin slowly. "This place." My mind raced. "This is your cabin?" He paused before answering. "Not exactly. What do you mean?" He walked past me, setting his gloves down by the fire like nothing was wrong. "People come here when they're lost, when the cold would have taken them otherwise." "That's good," I said, unsure. He looked at me then, really looked at me. "Yes," he replied. At first, a chill ran through me that had nothing to do with temperature. "What happens after?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the wall and gently touched one of the photos. "Some places," he said slowly, "don't like being alone." I followed his gaze. "You mean the cabin?" I asked. He shook his head. "The land." The fire crackled loudly, breaking the silence between us. "You should leave when the storm ends," he continued, "and you shouldn't come back, no matter what you see, no matter how lost you feel again." I nodded quickly. "I won't." He looked at me for a long moment, then said something I'll never forget. "Everyone says that." The storm outside eased by morning. The man was gone when I woke up. No footprints led away from the cabin. No tracks. No signs of anyone ever being there. I found my truck later that day, half buried but intact. The engine started on the first try. I never reported the cabin. And when I checked satellite maps weeks later, that clearing didn't exist. No structure, no trail. Just endless trees and snow. I left Alaska not long after that. But sometimes, when winter storms get bad where I live now, I dream about that cabin. Warm light in a frozen wilderness. Waiting. I used to think being home meant being safe. That no matter how bad the weather got, no matter how wild the world outside became, as long as you were behind your own door, wrapped in familiar walls, nothing truly bad could reach you. The blizzard that hit our town in February of 2018 taught me how wrong that belief was. I was 23 at the time, living back with my parents in a quiet little town in western Pennsylvania while I saved money after college. It was one of those towns that barely appeared on maps, the kind where everybody recognized your car but didn't necessarily know your name. Rows of old houses, narrow streets, a single grocery store, and a diner that hadn't updated its menu since the 70s. Winter there wasn't dramatic. It was just long. Snow fell steadily from December to March, covering everything in a dull gray-white that never really melted, just compacted into layers of ice and slush. That winter, though, something shifted. The storms came harder and closer together than usual. Plows barely had time to clear the streets before the next snowfall buried them again. People stopped complaining and started just going quiet about it, the way you do when something becomes too constant to talk about anymore. The blizzard that changed everything rolled in late on a Sunday night. It wasn't supposed to be that bad. The forecast said a foot of snow, high winds, maybe some power outages. Nothing out of the ordinary. By midnight, it was clear the forecast had been very wrong. The wind howled so loudly it rattled the windows. Snow slammed against the siding like handfuls of gravel. The sky outside our house glowed faintly orange from the streetlights. The light diffused into a foggy blur by the falling snow. My parents went to bed early, content to let the storm pass. I stayed up in the living room, scrolling through my phone, half watching TV, listening to the house creak and settle as the wind pushed against it. Around 1:30 in the morning, the power flickered. Once, twice. Then the TV went black. The room fell into a deep, unnatural silence, broken only by the roar of the storm outside. I sighed and reached for my phone flashlight. Power outages were common during storms like this. Usually, they lasted a few hours at most. I was about to head upstairs when I heard a sound that made my stomach tighten. 3 slow knocks. At the front door. Not loud, not frantic, just deliberate. I checked the time. 1:37 a.m. and no one knocks on doors at nearly 2 in the morning during a blizzard. I sat completely still, listening. Another knock. Same rhythm, same calm pressure. My first instinct was to ignore it, pretend I hadn't heard, wait for whoever it was to leave. But then the thought crept in that someone might be stranded, hurt, freezing. I grabbed my jacket, slipped my shoes on, and crept down the hallway toward the front door. I turned on the porch light. Nothing. Power was still out. I unlocked the door slowly and cracked it open just enough to look outside. Snow blew inside immediately, swirling around my ankles. Standing on the porch was a woman. She looked to be in her late 20s or early 30s, bundled in a thick coat and scarf, snow clinging to her hair and shoulders. Her face was pale, lips slightly blue, eyes red like she'd been crying or squinting against the wind. Relief washed over me. She looked normal, cold, human. I opened the door wider. "Are you okay?" She nodded quickly. My car slid off the road, she said quietly. "I tried walking to town, but I can't see anything. My phone died. I saw your lights earlier and thought maybe you could help." Her voice was steady, controlled, despite the situation. "You can come in," I said. "Get warm." She hesitated for just a second, then stepped inside. The moment the door closed behind her, something in the house felt Different. Not physically. Emotionally. Like the air had shifted. I led her into the living room and handed her a blanket. She wrapped it tightly around herself but didn't sit. Instead, she stood there, slowly scanning the room, eyes lingering on details like she was memorizing them. "Where did your car go off the road?" I asked. "Just past the old Miller farm," she said. "That was over a mile away. You walked here?" I asked. She nodded through the storm. Another nod. Something about that didn't sit right. She should have been shaking uncontrollably. Frostbitten. Exhausted. She looked cold. Yes. But not nearly as bad as she should have been. "Do you want some tea?" I offered. "That would be nice," she said softly. I went into the kitchen, then realized too late that without power, I couldn't boil water. When I turned back toward the living room, she wasn't on the couch. She was standing in the hallway, looking up the stairs. "My parents are up there," I said quickly. "They're asleep." She turned slowly toward me. "I wasn't going to go up," she said. "Just looking." The way she said it made my skin crawl. I gestured back toward the couch. "You can wait there." She returned to the living room, and finally Saturday I tried calling for help from my phone, but the signal was weak and kept dropping. The storm was interfering with everything. As the minutes passed, the unease only grew. She never took off her coat. She stopped shivering. Her eyes kept drifting to the hallway and the stairs. At some point, she spoke again. "Your house is very quiet. The power's out." I said, "No," she replied. "I mean quiet." The word lingered in the air. A few minutes later, I heard a faint sound upstairs. A creak, like someone shifting in bed. Relief washed over me. My parents were awake. I stood. "I'll go get my dad. He has a truck. He can help." She looked up sharply. "There's no need for that." "Why not?" "You already said you'd help me." I felt irritation and fear collide in my chest. "I am helping you, but my dad can get us to safety faster." She stood suddenly, blankets slipping from her shoulders. "I don't want him involved." The firmness in her voice made my heart race. "Something is wrong here," I said quietly. Her expression changed then. Not angry, not scared, disappointed, like I'd failed her. "You shouldn't be alone right now," she said softly. "What does that mean?" I asked. She stepped closer. "It means storms like this don't just take power. They take people." I turned toward the stairs. Behind me, she spoke again. "If you go up there, you won't be able to help me anymore." I ignored her and rushed upstairs. My parents were asleep, completely peaceful. Unaware. I woke my dad, panicked, trying to explain what was happening. We both hurried downstairs. The living room was empty. The front door was still locked. The blanket lay folded neatly on the couch. No sign anyone had been there, except for one thing: wet footprints, bare feet, leading from the couch into the hallway, stopping at the base of the stairs, right where I had been standing. The police found nothing. No crash car, no missing woman, no footprints in the snow outside. They said it was probably stress, imagination. But I know what I saw. And I know this. When the power goes out during a blizzard, I don't open the door, because sometimes storms don't bring strangers. They bring things that were waiting for you to be alone. There's a stretch of road in Montana that doesn't show up properly on most maps. It isn't unmarked. It isn't secret. It just doesn't seem important enough for anyone to care about. A thin 2-lane highway that cuts through nothing but open land and frozen trees, connecting two towns most people will never visit unless they're lost or trying to avoid something. That road is where I learned that sometimes the worst part of a blizzard isn't that you can't see, it's that you can't be seen. I was driving home from Bozeman late one night in December of 2019. I'd gone up for a short work contract and stayed longer than planned because the snow started coming down earlier than expected. By the time I left, the storm had settled in like it was planning to stay. The sky was a flat, unbroken gray. Snow drifted steadily across the windshield, thick enough to blur the horizon into nothingness. The world outside my headlights might as well not have existed. I wasn't scared at first. I'd driven through storms before. I grew up in Wyoming. Snow was just part of life. But there was something about this stretch of road that felt different. Not dangerous. Empty. The kind of empty that presses on your chest and makes your thoughts feel louder. There was no radio signal that far out. No cell service. No signs of life except the occasional fence post or frozen creek barely visible beneath the snow that I drove for nearly an hour without seeing another vehicle. Then I saw the truck. It was pulled off to the side of the road, nose buried slightly in a drift, hazards blinking weakly through the snowfall. The pickup, older model, dark color. I slowed instinctively. A person stood beside it first. I thought they were waving me down. But as I got closer, I realized they weren't moving at all. They were just standing there. I pulled over several yards behind the truck and put my car in park. The wind howled outside, rocking my car gently. I rolled my window down just enough to call out, "Hey, you need help." The person turned slowly. It was a man, tall, wearing a heavy jacket and gloves, his face mostly hidden by a hood. "Yeah," he said, "my truck won't start. Battery's dead." I stepped out into the storm, immediately regretting it. The cold bit through my coat, the wind pushing snow against my face so hard it stung. I approached him cautiously. "Do you have cables?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah." In the back. We moved to the rear of the truck together. He opened the tailgate and fumbled around, pulling out jumper cables with stiff fingers as we walked back toward my car. I tried making small talk, asked where he was headed. "Just to Miles City," he said. "That was over 50 miles away. You broke down here." He shrugged. "Bad luck." There was something off about him that I couldn't quite place. Not threatening, just wrong. Like he wasn't reacting to the cold the way he should have been. We hooked up the cables, my engine running while his truck remained silent. After a few minutes, he tried turning the key. Nothing, again. Still nothing. Battery's probably completely shot. I said. He stared at the dashboard for a moment, then turned to look at me. "Can you give me a ride?" I hesitated. It wasn't that I didn't want to help. It was that a voice in the back of my head was screaming not to let him in my car. "How far do you need to go?" I asked. "Just to the next town," he said. "That was at least 30 miles. That's a long ride." He smiled faintly. "It's either that or freeze out here." The wind howled around us like it was reinforcing his words. I nodded slowly. "All right, but we're going straight there." He opened the passenger door and climbed in. The moment he sat down, the inside of my car felt colder. Not physically, but like the warmth had been sucked out of the air. I started driving. It first. Neither of us spoke. The road stretched endlessly ahead, white and empty. After a while, I tried again. "So what were you doing out here?" He was quiet for a few seconds. Then he said, "Looking for what people?" I glanced at him. He was staring straight ahead. "Why?" Another pause. "Because people drive these roads when they think no one is watching." That sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the weather. I forced a laugh. "Well, someone's watching now." He turned and looked at me then, and his eyes were wrong. Not in a dramatic way, not glowing or hollow, just empty, like he wasn't really seeing me at all. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said quietly. "Neither should you." He smiled. We drove in silence again. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Snow grew heavier, the wind louder. My headlights barely cut through it anymore. At some point, I realized something that made my stomach drop. We should have reached the town by now. But the road signs weren't changing. No lights in the distance, no buildings, just endless trees and snow. Did I miss something? I asked. He didn't answer. I looked at him. He was staring at me, not blinking. "Why are we still out here?" I asked, my voice tightening. He tilted his head slightly. "Because you're still driving." I slowed the car. "What does that mean?" He leaned closer. "It means you haven't decided to stop." My heart began to pound. "Stop the car," I said. He smiled wider. Why would you do that? Because something's wrong. He laughed softly. Everything's wrong out here. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded slightly, coming to a stop in the middle of the empty road. I reached for the door handle. Before I could open it, his hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was icy cold. Do you know how many people disappear on roads like this? He whispered. I yanked my hand free and shoved him away. Get out of my car. Now. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then he opened the door and stepped out into the storm. I sped off without looking back. I drove until the gas light came on. Until the storm eased. Until I reached a real town with real lights and real people. I reported everything. They searched. They found his truck, frozen solid. Abandoned for weeks. No sign of anyone around. No footprints. No evidence anyone had been there recently. They told me I was confused, that the storm must have made me hallucinate. But I know this. I did not imagine the cold of his hand. And sometimes, late at night, when snow is falling and the world feels too empty, I swear I can still hear him asking quietly, "Why would you stop now?"